The soft whir of the scanner fills the cramped apartment as Emma Davidson watches the old photograph slowly materialize on her computer screen. The sepia-toned image is grainy, worn at the edges, a piece of history rescued from an antique shop's forgotten corner. It shows a cemetery in autumn, leafless trees stretching skeletal fingers toward a colorless sky, rows of weathered headstones jutting from frost-hardened earth. In the foreground, a lone figure stands with a shovel in hand, face obscured by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. The timestamp in faded ink on the back reads simply, Oakwood Cemetery, November 1885. Emma zooms in, examining the details with the practiced eye of a photography archivist. Something about the image feels wrong, not manipulated or doctored. She's seen enough forgeries to recognize those, but something unsettling she can't quite place. The composition is oddly static, even for Victorian-era photography. The angle suggests the photographer stood on slightly elevated ground, capturing not just the gravestones and solitary figure, but the expanse of Oakwood stretching toward the distant tree line. The image possesses a quietness that feels almost deliberate, as if the camera had been positioned to document something specific. Her eyes drift back to the gravedigger, a solitary silhouette against the pale November sky. The man's posture is rigid, shoulders squared, hands gripping the wooden handle of his shovel with peculiar intensity. No casual laborer's stance, but the alertness of someone on guard. Emma's phone vibrates, breaking her concentration. It's her colleague, Marcus, texting about their upcoming exhibition on Victorian memorial photography. She's been collecting pieces for months now, but this cemetery photo is her latest acquisition, purchased on impulse when she spotted it beneath a stack of unremarkable family portraits at Fielding's Antiques last weekend. Found anything worth displaying? Marcus's text reads. Emma hesitates, fingers hovering over her reply. The Oakwood Cemetery photograph is undoubtedly compelling, but her instincts tell her there's more to it than mere historical interest. Possibly, she types back. Something unusual. We'll show you tomorrow. Emma's studio apartment is dimly lit, save for the blue glow of her computer. Outside, Chicago's winter darkness has already settled at just past 4 in the afternoon. Rain taps against the window, promising to turn to snow by morning according to the weather report she'd half listened to earlier. She pulls her cardigan tighter and returns her attention to the image, zooming further into the gravedigger's silhouette. The shovel. There's something about the shovel that doesn't seem right. She magnifies the area, enhancing the resolution as much as the old photograph will allow. The gravedigger's hands grip the wooden handle, but the metal blade of the shovel reflects something, what appears to be a face, eyes wide with terror, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Emma jerks back from the screen, heart suddenly pounding. It can't be. Photography in 1885 required long exposure times. If someone had walked into frame, they would appear as a blur or a ghost-like figure, not a perfectly captured reflection of fear. She reaches for her mug of tea, now cold, taking a sip to steady herself before leaning in again. The face is unmistakable. A man perhaps in his 40s, beard neatly trimmed in the fashion of the era, eyes wide with an emotion that transcends time. Not the stoic expression typical of Victorian photography, when subjects had to hold still for extended periods, but raw, immediate terror, as if whatever he was witnessing in that moment had shattered all social conventions of composure. She looks again, adjusting the contrast and brightness settings. The face is still there, unmistakable now, eyes staring directly back at her through time, through the reflective surface of a gravedigger's tool. A cold sensation crawls up her spine as she realizes the face doesn't belong to anyone visible in the cemetery. It's as though the shovel has captured something, or someone, beyond the photographer's lens. Most disturbing of all, the terrified face seems to be looking at something specific, not at the camera, but slightly to the right of the frame, at something happening just out of the photograph's view. Emma finds herself instinctively glancing in that direction, half expecting to see whatever caused such fear. But there's only her apartment wall with its framed print of Atget's Saint Cloud. Emma saves the enhanced image and leans back, rubbing her tired eyes. Maybe she's seeing patterns that aren't there. It wouldn't be the first time her imagination has gotten the better of her. Working with historical photographs, especially those centered around death and mourning, requires a certain emotional distance she sometimes struggles to maintain. The rain intensifies outside, tapping against her windows with increasing urgency. The radiator beneath the windowsill hisses and clanks. the building's ancient heating system laboring against the early winter chill. Emma stands, stretching the stiffness from her shoulders, and moves to the kitchenette to reheat her tea. As the microwave hums, she finds herself glancing repeatedly at her computer screen, where the minimized image of the cemetery waits like an unspoken question. Her phone rings. Marcus again, this time calling. "Did you get my texts?" he asks without preamble. "The curator wants our final selections by Friday." "I found something interesting," Emma replies, her voice tighter than intended. "A cemetery shot from 1885. There's something strange about it." "Strange how?" Marcus sounds intrigued. As the museum's resident expert on 19th century photography, he's seen his share of peculiarities: daguerreotypes with unexplained light phenomena, memento mori portraits with eerily lifelike qualities. "I can't explain it. I need to show you. Email it over." "No," Emma says quickly, surprising herself with the vehemence in her voice. "I need you to see it in person. Can you come by the lab tomorrow?" There's a pause on the line. Marcus has known Emma for 3 years, since she joined the Chicago Historical Society as a junior archivist. He's familiar with her methodical approach, her reluctance to speculate without evidence. Whatever she's found has genuinely unsettled her. "First thing," he agrees, curiosity evident in his tone. 8 o'clock, before the morning meeting? Perfect. And Marcus, bring your best magnifier. After hanging up, Emma stares at the image once more. The face in the shovel seems to be looking more directly at her now, as if aware of her scrutiny across the span of nearly a century and a half. She closes the file hastily and shuts down her computer. That night, Emma sleeps fitfully, dreaming of cold earth and the rhythmic sound of digging. In the dream, she stands in Oakwood Cemetery, though she's never visited it in waking life. The ground beneath her feet vibrates with each strike of an unseen shovel. The sound comes from all directions at once, making it impossible to locate. The sky above is the same colorless expanse as in the photograph, but the cemetery stretches impossibly in every direction. The horizon an unbroken line of headstones. And somewhere, just beyond her peripheral vision, something moves between the graves, something that leaves no footprints in the frost-hardened earth. She wakes at 3:17 a.m., sheets twisted around her legs, her nightshirt damp with perspiration despite the chill in her apartment. For several minutes, she lies still, listening to the night sounds of the building. A distant door closing, water moving through pipes, the occasional creak of settling timbers. Ordinary sounds that tonight seem like coded messages she can't quite interpret. Emma reaches for her phone on the nightstand, illuminating the room with its blue glow. She hesitates only briefly before opening her browser and searching for Oakwood Cemetery, Chicago history. The search returns numerous results. Oakwood is one of the city's oldest and largest cemeteries, established in 1853. She skims articles about its notable monuments and famous interments, finding nothing unusual until she reaches a brief mention of unexplained incidents in the 1880s that nearly resulted in the cemetery's closure. The article provides no details, merely noting that local authorities intervened following several disappearances connected to the grounds. A footnote references historical newspapers from the period, archived at the Chicago Historical Society, her workplace. Emma makes a mental note to access these archives tomorrow after showing Marcus the photograph. Whatever happened at Oakwood in the 1880s might explain the unsettling image she's discovered. She puts her phone down and tries to return to sleep, but for the remainder of the night, she drifts in and out of consciousness, her dreams filled with indistinct shadows moving between headstones and the persistent sound of digging. The research lab at the Chicago Historical Society is quiet the next morning. Emma has arrived early, before the museum opens to the public. She's already set up the original photograph under specialized lighting, with the digital scan enlarged on her monitor. The lab occupies what was once a storage area in the Historical Society's East Wing, converted 5 years ago to accommodate the growing collection of photographic artifacts. Climate control systems hum softly, maintaining the precise temperature and humidity levels necessary for preservation. The walls are lined with locked cabinets containing the most delicate items, daguerreotypes in their velvet-lined cases, glass negatives from the Civil War era, salt prints from the earliest days of photography. Emma has always found comfort in this room, surrounded by images that have survived decades or centuries, each one a frozen moment preserved against time's erosion. Today, however, the shadowed corners seem to hold an unfamiliar tension, as if the accumulated weight of history has somehow shifted overnight. She adjusts her workstation, positioning the Oakwood Cemetery photograph under the specialized magnifying apparatus. The original is approximately 4 by 6 inches, mounted on cardboard backing typical of the period. The edges show mild foxing, but the image itself remains remarkably clear, the work of a skilled photographer using what was then modern equipment. The door opens, and Marcus arrives, coffee in hand, his breath still visible from the February cold. Snowflakes cling to his dark wool coat and glint in his beard. At 45, he carries himself with the comfortable authority of someone secure in his expertise. His specialty is 19th century American photography, with particular emphasis on how emerging photographic technologies shaped cultural perceptions of death and remembrance. "This better be worth dragging me across town in a snowstorm," he jokes. But his smile fades as he studies the photograph. "Oakwood," he murmurs, recognizing the cemetery. Interesting composition. The solitary gravedigger makes for a powerful memento mori. Emma watches as he examines the photograph with professional interest, noting the technical aspects before the content, the quality of light, the composition, the processing techniques evident in the print's tonal range. "Cabinet card format, albumen print on silver bromide paper," he notes. "High-quality work for the period." He looks up. "Where did you find this?" "Fielding's Antiques on North Clark, mixed in with a box of unremarkable family portraits. The owner practically gave it away. Said cemetery photos give him the creeps." Marcus nods, returning his attention to the image. Not uncommon for the period, though typically cemetery photographs included mourning parties or memorial gatherings. This solitary figure is somewhat unusual. He frowns, leaning closer. The focus is exceptional for 1885, almost modern in its clarity. "Look at the shovel," Emma says, pointing to the enlarged section on her screen. "Tell me what you see." Marcus moves to the monitor, squinting behind his wire-framed glasses. His expression shifts from professional interest to something more complex. "That's unusual." His academic detachment wavers. It could be a double exposure or some kind of processing error. In 1885, with plate photography? You know how difficult that would be to fake. Marcus straightens, adjusting his glasses, a nervous habit Emma recognizes from their previous collaborations. When confronted with anomalies that challenge his understanding, he often retreats briefly into scholarly skepticism before engaging with the evidence. "May I?" He gestures toward the original. Emma nods, and he carefully examines it with a magnifying loupe from his pocket, more powerful than the one she's been using. For several minutes, he studies the photograph in silence, occasionally adjusting the angle to catch the light differently. "The paper stock and albumen process are consistent with the period," he confirms at last. "No signs of modern alteration or manipulation." He looks up, expression thoughtful. "The reflection is definitely there in the original, not an artifact of your digital enhancement." Emma feels a complex mixture of validation and unease. Part of her had hoped Marcus would discover a simple explanation, a flaw in the development process, a trick of light and shadow. Instead, he's confirmed her suspicions that something genuinely anomalous exists in the image. "Did you research Oakwood Cemetery records from that time?" Marcus asks, setting down the loupe. Emma shakes her head. "Not extensively. I wanted your opinion first." She hesitates, then adds, "But I did find a brief mention of unexplained incidents at Oakwood in the 1880s. Apparently there were disappearances connected to the cemetery." Marcus's eyebrows lift with interest. "Now that you mention it, I recall reading something about Oakwood in a monograph on Chicago's historical burial grounds." He frowns, searching his memory. "There was a particularly harsh winter that year, if I recall correctly. 1885 and 86. The ground would have been difficult to break for burials." Emma turns back to her computer and opens a browser, searching for historical records of Oakwood Cemetery. The Historical Society maintains an extensive digital archive of Chicago newspapers, accessible only to staff and qualified researchers. She navigates to the database and enters search parameters for November 1885, filtering for any mentions of Oakwood. The search returns several results, mostly funeral notices and announcements of burials. But among them is a small article from the Chicago Daily Tribune, dated November 17, 1885. "Listen to this," she says, reading aloud. "Tragedy at Oakwood. Local authorities continue to investigate the disappearance of 3 individuals last seen near the cemetery grounds. Joseph Miller, groundskeeper, reports unusual disturbances among recent burial plots. Citizens are advised to avoid the area after nightfall." Marcus raises an eyebrow. Interesting coincidence. There's more. Emma continues, opening another article dated a week later. Groundskeeper Miller discovered deceased on cemetery property. Preliminary reports suggest exposure to elements as cause. Investigation into recent disappearances continues. So the groundskeeper died shortly after reporting unusual disturbances. Marcus summarizes, moving to read over Emma's shoulder. Definitely intriguing from a historical perspective, but I'm not sure how it connects to your photograph. What if... Emma stops, aware of how speculative her next words will sound, especially to someone with Marcus's academic rigor. But the pattern is too compelling to ignore. What if this is Miller? She points to the reflected face in the shovel. What if he captured something in this photograph? Something connected to what eventually happened to him? Marcus gives her a measured look. In the 7 years since completing his PhD, he's built a reputation for methodical research and evidence-based conclusions. Speculation about supernatural phenomena has no place in his professional work. Yet, Emma has never known him to dismiss unusual findings without investigation. That's quite a leap, Emma. Historically speaking, groundskeepers were often different from gravediggers, and most cemetery photography from this period was commissioned by wealthy families as part of mourning practices. Then why is there no mourning party in the image? Just a solitary figure with a shovel, Emma points out. And what explains the reflection? Marcus studies the enhanced image again. I admit it's peculiar, but there could be rational explanations. Light artifacts, damage to the original plate. He trails off, not entirely convinced by his own suggestions. I want to visit Oakwood, Emma announces suddenly. The cemetery still exists. Maybe there are records on site that didn't make it into digital archives. Marcus's expression shifts to one of concern. Emma, his tone turns cautious. I appreciate your thoroughness, but it's just a photograph. An interesting one for our exhibition, certainly, but it's more than that, she interrupts. I can feel it. And aren't you the least bit curious? The historian in you must want to understand this anomaly, if only to document it properly. She's appealing to his professional instincts, and they both know it. Marcus has built his career on meticulous documentation of historical photographic techniques and their cultural contexts. An unexplained phenomenon like this, if genuine, would be significant to his field. After a moment, Marcus sighs, a slight smile tugging at his mouth. You know exactly how to get to me, don't you? He glances at his watch. I have a lecture this afternoon, but I'm free tomorrow. If you're determined to pursue this, I'll come with you. My car handles the snow better than yours anyway. Emma smiles, relieved. Thank you. I know it seems excessive, but your instincts are usually good. Marcus finishes for her. I remember the Haymarket riot photographs you authenticated last year when everyone else thought they were reproductions. He begins gathering his things. I trust your judgment, Emma. If you think there's something here worth investigating, I'm willing to help. As Marcus prepares to leave, he pauses at the door. In the meantime, see what else you can find about Oakwood in that period. And Emma, his expression turns serious, try not to get too invested in this. Sometimes a photograph is just a photograph. But as Emma returns to the image on her screen, the face in the shovel's reflection seems to have shifted slightly, the eyes now looking not at the camera but somewhere off to the side, as if tracking something moving just out of frame. She blinks, certain she's imagining it, but the change persists, subtle but undeniable. Emma glances over her shoulder at the empty lab, suddenly aware of the silence surrounding her. She reaches out and minimizes the image, unable to shake the irrational feeling that the longer she looks at it, the more it changes, or the more it allows something else to look back at her. The rest of her workday passes with excruciating slowness. Emma attempts to focus on cataloging recent acquisitions for the upcoming exhibition, but her thoughts continually drift back to the Oakwood photograph and the mysteries surrounding it. During her lunch break, she returns to the newspaper archives, searching for any additional information about Joseph Miller or the disappearances connected to the cemetery. She finds several more articles, each providing fragmentary details that begin to form a more complete picture. Before the groundskeeper's death, 3 visitors to the cemetery had vanished without trace. A young woman named Elizabeth Calloway, who had been visiting her recently deceased fiancé's grave, and an elderly couple, Abraham and Miriam Stein, paying respects to their daughter. Their disappearances, occurring within days of each other, had caused a brief sensation in the local press, before being overshadowed by a political scandal involving the mayor. The authorities had initially suspected foul play, perhaps a deranged individual targeting vulnerable mourners. But extensive searches of the cemetery grounds and surrounding areas had yielded no bodies, no signs of struggle, no evidence of what had befallen the missing visitors. After Miller's death, the cemetery had been temporarily closed for investigation, reopening only after the implementation of enhanced security measures that the newspaper left frustratingly unspecified. Most interesting to Emma is a small article dated December 3, 1885, noting that special iron markers have been installed throughout Oakwood Cemetery at the recommendation of geological experts who identified unstable ground conditions that may have contributed to recent tragic events. The article suggested these markers would prevent further ground subsidence, a scientific-sounding explanation that struck Emma as oddly specific, given the lack of evidence for actual sinkholes or similar phenomena. By the time she leaves work that evening, Emma has compiled a substantial file of notes and article excerpts. The historical record paints a picture of a brief but intense period of unusual activity at Oakwood Cemetery, followed by intervention that seemingly resolved the situation. But nowhere does she find an explanation that satisfactorily accounts for all the facts, particularly the terrified face reflected in a gravedigger's shovel in a photograph taken just before the incidents began. That night, Emma dreams again of Oakwood Cemetery. This time she's not merely an observer but moves among the headstones, following the sound of digging that always remains just beyond the next row of graves. The air is bitterly cold, her breath forming clouds that linger before dissolving into the colorless sky. As she walks, she becomes aware that the ground beneath her feet doesn't feel solid. There's a subtle give to it, as if the earth is somehow less substantial than it should be. The digging sound stops abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete it seems to press against her eardrums. Emma finds herself standing before a freshly dug grave, the soil piled neatly beside the rectangular hole. From within the grave comes a soft scraping sound like fingernails against wood, or perhaps like something scratching to get out. She steps forward involuntarily, compelled to look into the open grave. But before she can see what lies at the bottom, a hand grips her arm. She turns to find the gravedigger from the photograph standing beside her, face still obscured by shadow despite their proximity. "Don't look," a man's voice warns, urgent and fearful. "Whatever you do, don't look directly at it. It feeds on observation." Emma wakes with a gasp, the dream clinging to her consciousness with unusual persistence. The digital clock beside her bed reads 4:53 a.m., too early to get up, too late to hope for meaningful rest. She lies awake until dawn, contemplating the gravedigger's warning. It feeds on observation. The phrase feels significant, though she can't articulate why. The following day dawns gray and frigid. Emma barely slept, having spent most of the night researching Oakwood Cemetery and the events of November 1885. What she found only deepened the mystery. Before groundskeeper Miller's death, 3 visitors to the cemetery had vanished without trace. A young woman paying respects to her recently deceased fiancé, and an elderly couple visiting their daughter's grave. Their disappearances, occurring within days of each other, had caused a brief sensation in the local press, before being overshadowed by a political scandal involving the mayor. Marcus picks Emma up at 9. His Subaru cuts through the slushy streets as they make their way south to Oakwood, one of Chicago's oldest and most historic cemeteries. The windshield wipers beat a hypnotic rhythm against the light snowfall. NPR plays quietly from the speakers, a segment about climate change that neither of them pays attention to. Marcus glances at Emma, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "Rough night?" She nods, clutching a travel mug of coffee like a lifeline. "Strange dreams about the cemetery." "Not surprising, given how much you've been researching it." He navigates around a delivery truck double-parked on Ellis Avenue. "Find anything else interesting?" Emma nods, scrolling through notes on her phone. Joseph Miller had been groundskeeper at Oakwood for 22 years. Well respected, no history of mental instability or alcohol abuse. His reports of disturbances were taken seriously by local authorities, which suggests he wasn't known for exaggeration. And the official cause of his death? Exposure, according to the papers. He was found near the northeast section of the cemetery, having apparently collapsed while making his rounds. But she hesitates, uncertain how Marcus will receive what comes next. "But what?" he prompts, turning onto the road that leads to Oakwood. "I found a mention in a personal account written by one of the investigators. It was published years later in a collection of unsolved cases." He claimed Miller's expression showed extreme terror, uncharacteristic of death by natural causes. The account was dismissed as sensationalism. Marcus navigates a tricky turn, tires crunching on road salt. People have always had a flair for the dramatic when it comes to death. Victorian literature is full of overwrought descriptions of corpses expressing emotions they couldn't possibly feel. The same account mentioned that Miller's hands were bleeding, with broken fingernails, as if he'd been desperately clawing at something. This gives Marcus pause. His scholarly skepticism momentarily gives way to genuine intrigue. That's certainly more concrete. Did this investigator offer any theories? Only that whatever Miller was afraid of, it wasn't human. Emma immediately feels foolish saying it aloud. In the harsh light of day, her midnight research sounds more like ghost stories than scholarship. But Marcus doesn't dismiss it outright. Fear can make people do strange things, he says instead, turning into the grand entrance of Oakwood Cemetery. And the Victorian imagination was particularly susceptible to supernatural explanations. Remember, this was the era of spiritualism and seances, when even educated people believed in communication with the dead. The cemetery stretches before them, a vast landscape of monuments and memorials dusted with snow. Ancient trees stand sentinel along winding paths, their bare branches etched against the gray winter sky. Despite the bright morning, shadows seem deeper here, the silence more complete once Marcus cuts the engine. For a moment they sit in the car, taking in the view. Oakwood Cemetery encompasses 183 acres of carefully landscaped grounds, designed in the rural cemetery tradition that emerged in the mid-19th century. Unlike the crowded churchyards it replaced, Oakwood was conceived as a park-like setting where the living could commune with nature while remembering the dead. "It's beautiful," Emma murmurs, surprised by the serenity of the place despite its connection to the disturbing photograph. Many of Chicago's early cemeteries were designed as much for the living as the dead, Marcus explains, his professor's instinct surfacing. They were meant to be places of contemplation and even recreation. Families would come for picnics among the graves of their ancestors. They exit the car, the cold air immediately biting at their exposed faces. Emma pulls her scarf higher, grateful for the layers she'd worn. February in Chicago demands serious winter attire. The administrative office is housed in a stone building near the entrance, its architecture reminiscent of the Victorian era when the cemetery was established. Inside, the air is pleasantly warm, scented faintly with old books and furniture polish. A reception area features framed historical photographs of the cemetery and its notable monuments. Emma scans these quickly, looking for anything resembling the image in her possession, but finds nothing similar. They're greeted by an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, who introduces herself as Patricia Delaney, the cemetery's historian and record keeper. She wears a cardigan the color of autumn leaves over a simple black dress, a small silver pin shaped like an oak leaf fastened at her collar. "How may I help you today?" she inquires, her voice carrying the slight lilt of an Irish ancestry several generations removed. Marcus introduces them as researchers from the Chicago Historical Society, working on an exhibition of Victorian memorial photography. "We're particularly interested in events from November 1885, he explains, especially anything related to the groundskeeper at that time, Joseph Miller. Patricia's expression shifts subtly at the mention of Miller's name, not quite alarm, but a heightened attention that suggests recognition beyond professional interest. "Miller," she repeats as if testing the name. "Yes, we have quite extensive records from that period. The cemetery board was thorough in their documentation after the incidents." "Incidents?" Marcus inquires, professional interest piqued. The term matches exactly what Emma had found in her research, suggesting a direct connection to the institutional memory of the cemetery. Patricia gestures for them to follow her into a back room lined with fireproof filing cabinets and archival boxes. The space resembles a small library, with a central reading table, surrounded by records organized by decade. The oldest materials, dating back to Oakwood's founding in 1853, are protected in special preservation containers. The disappearances and Miller's death caused quite a stir, Patricia explains as she moves with practiced efficiency toward a section labeled 1880, 1889. Oakwood nearly closed permanently as a result. It was only the intervention of several prominent Chicago families with ancestors interred here that kept it open. She retrieves a leather-bound ledger and several folders, laying them carefully on the reading table. These are the original records, including Miller's reports leading up to his death and the subsequent investigation. We've maintained them in their original format, though most have been digitized for preservation purposes. Emma and Marcus exchange glances. This is more than they'd hoped for. Direct access to primary sources documenting the very events they're investigating. "May I ask what sparked your interest in this particular history?" Patricia asks as she opens the ledger to November 1885. Her tone is conversational, but Emma detects an underlying tension in the question. Emma hesitates, then removes the photograph from her bag, keeping it in its protective sleeve. "I recently acquired this. We believe it may have been taken here during that period." Patricia examines it through the archival plastic, her expression unreadable. For several seconds she studies the image in silence, her finger tracing the outline of the gravedigger without actually touching the protective covering. "Yes," she confirms after a moment. "This is Oakwood. That section there," she points to the background, "is what we now call the Pioneer section, where many of Chicago's founding families are interred." She studies the image more carefully. And that man, given the time period and his position, that could very well be Joseph Miller. "The groundskeeper?" Emma clarifies. "Not a gravedigger?" Joseph served as both. After the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, many cemeteries struggled financially. Staff was reduced, and those who remained often performed multiple duties. Patricia returns the photograph. "Where did you find this?" Emma explains her purchase at Fielding's Antiques, watching carefully for any reaction from Patricia. The older woman's composure remains intact, but her eyes linger on the photograph with what might be recognition. "Interesting," Patricia murmurs. "To my knowledge, no photographs of Miller have survived in our archives. This may be the only existing image of him." She closes the ledger she'd been about to open. "I'll leave you to examine these records. They contain Miller's reports, the investigation findings, and the cemetery board's response to the incidents. Take your time. I'll be at my desk if you need anything further." As Patricia leaves, closing the door behind her, Emma and Marcus exchange glances. "She recognized it," Emma says softly. "Did you see her reaction?" Marcus nods. She seemed concerned, but not surprised. He pulls the ledger toward him. "Let's see what these records tell us." They begin carefully examining the documents, starting with Miller's handwritten reports. The first entries from early November start mundane enough. Notes about maintenance needs, burial schedules, and weather conditions affecting ground preparation. Miller's handwriting is precise and disciplined, his observations detailed without being verbose. The record-keeping of a man who took his responsibilities seriously. But beginning on November 7th, the entries take a darker turn. Marcus reads aloud from that date. "Discovered evidence of unauthorized digging in Section E, Plot 237. No signs of grave robbery or vandalism, yet earth has been disturbed. Most peculiar." Emma finds the next entry, dated November 9th. "Second instance of ground disturbance, now at Plot 242. Spoke with groundsman Collins, who denies any work in this area. Soil displacement appears to come from below rather than above. Reported to authorities who suggest animal activity. I disagree." The entries continue, growing increasingly concerned and specific. By November 12th, Miller writes of hearing movement beneath the frost layer and sounds unlike any burrowing creature known to me. He requests permission to exhume several plots for inspection, but his request is denied by the cemetery board as unnecessary and potentially disturbing to the families of the deceased. On November 15th, Miller reports the disappearance of Elizabeth Calloway, last seen visiting her fiancé's grave in the Pioneer section. His entry reveals a man increasingly troubled. "Miss Calloway's reticule and shawl were found near Plot 237, where I first observed ground disturbance. Police suggest she may have wandered off, perhaps in a state of emotional distress. I do not share this assessment. Something is wrong in this place." The final entry, dated November 16th, the day before the newspaper reported him missing, contains a hastily scrawled note. "Stein's missing now too. Authorities searching, but looking in wrong places. It is not the dead we must fear, but what dwells among them. I have seen it reflected in still water and polished stone. Tonight I shall bring my camera to capture what eyes alone cannot convince others to believe. God help me if I am right." Emma's breath catches. The photograph. He took it that night. Marcus nods slowly, the academic skepticism in his expression giving way to genuine unease. The timeline fits, and this mention of seeing something reflected in still water and polished stone, that could explain the face in the shovel's reflection. They turn their attention to the official investigation into Miller's death and the disappearances. The reports are detailed but ultimately inconclusive. Miller's body was discovered on the morning of November 17th by another cemetery employee, lying near Plot 237 in the Pioneer section. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as exposure to the elements, noting that temperatures had dropped severely overnight. The three missing visitors, Elizabeth Calloway and the Stein couple, were never found, despite extensive searches of the cemetery and surrounding areas. The most puzzling document is the cemetery board's response to these events. Rather than the expected administrative measures, increased security patrols, improved lighting, the board had commissioned a geological survey of the cemetery grounds and consulted with specialists whose expertise is never clearly defined. Based on their recommendations, iron markers were installed at specific locations throughout the Pioneer section, particularly around the plots Miller had identified in his reports. But one document catches Emma's particular attention: a sealed envelope labeled Personal Effects of J. Miller, Restricted Access. It's attached to the inside back cover of the ledger with a wax seal that appears unbroken for decades. Should we? Emma glances toward the front office where Patricia sits, visible through the glass partition separating the archives from the reception area. Breaking the seal would be tampering with historical materials, something both of them, as professional archivists, have been trained never to do. Marcus hesitates only briefly before nodding. For research purposes, he justifies, carefully breaking the seal. We can reseal it afterward. No one need know. Inside is an inventory list of items found with Miller's body, including a pocket watch, keys, and a notebook filled with observations similar to those in his official reports. Most intriguing is a mention of one damaged photographic plate deemed unrecoverable. Beneath this is a personal note from the investigating officer. Miller's camera was found crushed beyond repair approximately 10 feet from his body. The plate was exposed but rendered unusable due to what appears to be deep scoring marks across its surface. Nature of markings inconsistent with normal damage or weather exposure. Recommended disposal denied by Miller's daughter, who insisted on keeping the plate despite its condition. Emma looks up, pulse quickening. There was another photograph, or at least an attempt at one, taken the night he died, after the one I found. And his daughter kept the plate. Marcus adds, already thinking ahead. We need to find out what happened to Miller's belongings after his death. They carefully reseal the envelope, making it appear undisturbed, and return to Patricia with focused questions about Miller's family. They learn his daughter, Elizabeth Miller, never married and lived in the groundskeeper's cottage on cemetery property until her own death in 1942. She was devoted to this place, Patricia explains, a note of respect in her voice. Served as unofficial historian for decades, though she had no formal training. The cemetery records from that period are largely organized according to her system. What happened to her possessions after her death? Emma asks, trying to sound merely professionally curious. The cottage was cleared, and her personal effects were offered to distant relatives. Patricia explains. What they didn't claim was donated to the Chicago Historical Society, as specified in her will. Emma and Marcus exchange significant looks. The Historical Society is where they both work, which means Miller's damaged photographic plate, if it survived, could be in their own archives. Is there an inventory of what was donated? Marcus asks, his tone carefully neutral, despite the excitement Emma can sense beneath his professional demeanor. Patricia shakes her head. Not in our records. You'd have to check with your own archives department. She studies them thoughtfully. Elizabeth was quite particular about preserving her father's legacy. If something of his survived, she would have ensured it was properly preserved, even if others saw no value in it. After thanking Patricia for her assistance, they make one more request: to visit the locations mentioned in Miller's reports. The historian hesitates momentarily before agreeing, providing them with a cemetery map marked with the relevant plots. Stay on the paths, she cautions as they prepare to leave. The ground can be treacherous in winter, especially in the older sections where settling has occurred. Something in her tone suggests she's not merely concerned about their physical safety. Equipped with the map and their heavy winter gear, Emma and Marcus venture into the snow-covered grounds. The cemetery in daylight bears little resemblance to the eerie landscape of Emma's dreams, yet she can't shake a sense of familiarity as they navigate the winding paths between monuments and mausoleums. The Pioneer section lies in the northeast corner of the cemetery, somewhat isolated from the more frequently visited areas. The paths here are narrower, the monuments older and more weathered. Many of the names carved into the stones have faded to near illegibility, centuries of Chicago winters having taken their toll. Plot 237 should be just ahead. Marcus consults the map as they pick their way carefully between graves. The plot, when they find it, is marked by a simple headstone half buried in snow. Emma brushes away the white powder to reveal the name. Catherine Wells, 1842-1885. She was freshly buried when Miller reported the disturbance, Emma notes, checking the date against her notes. Only 2 weeks between her burial and his first report of unusual activity. Marcus kneels to examine the grave more closely, brushing away more snow to reveal an unusual feature. A small iron marker embedded in the ground at the foot of the grave. The marker is approximately 4 inches in diameter, its surface engraved with symbols neither of them recognize. Not standard Christian iconography, nor any Masonic or fraternal emblems they're familiar with. This must be one of the markers installed after Miller's death, Marcus observes, tracing the symbols with his gloved finger. They're unusual, not standard cemetery markers from this period. They continue to plot 242, finding a similar situation, a grave from 1885, no visible evidence of disturbance after more than a century of weather and time, but the same type of iron marker positioned precisely at the foot of the headstone. The third location mentioned in Miller's reports belongs to a family plot marked by a larger monument with multiple names, including a recent addition dated just 5 years ago. Still in use, Marcus observes, which means the ground has been disturbed legitimately since 1885. This plot features not 1, but 4 iron markers, positioned at the corners of the family plot. Like the others, they bear the same strange symbols, though weathering has made some of the engravings less distinct. Emma walks slowly around the monument, taking in the surroundings. From this position, she can see much of the pioneer section, including the vantage point from which the photograph in her possession was taken. "Marcus," she calls, pointing. "The photograph was taken from right over there, looking this direction. These are the same headstones visible in the background." Marcus joins her, comparing the scene with the image on Emma's phone. "You're right. Miller was standing approximately where we are now when he captured that gravedigger in the distance." He pauses, frowning. "But wait, if Miller took the photograph, who is the figure with the shovel?" They both consider this contradiction. If Joseph Miller was both the photographer and the groundskeeper mentioned in the historical records, he couldn't simultaneously be the gravedigger captured in the image. Unless, what if Miller wasn't alone that night? Emma suggests. What if he had an assistant or colleague who took the photograph while Miller investigated the disturbances? Possible, Marcus acknowledges, though the records don't mention anyone accompanying him during his final rounds. A cold gust of wind sweeps through the cemetery, bringing heavier snow. The sky has darkened considerably in the last hour, the promised winter storm moving in faster than predicted. The temperature has dropped noticeably, their breath forming denser clouds in the frigid air. "We should head back," Marcus suggests, zipping his jacket higher. "We can continue this investigation from the warmth of the Historical Society's archives. I want to search for that donation from Elizabeth Miller." As they turn to leave, Emma takes one last photograph with her phone, capturing the same view as the 1885 image. The act feels important somehow, a way of connecting present to past, of acknowledging what happened here nearly a century and a half ago. They make their way back toward the administrative building, the snow falling more heavily now, reducing visibility and muffling sound. The cemetery seems transformed by the weather, distances distorted, familiar landmarks obscured. Emma finds herself walking closer to Marcus, an irrational fear taking hold, that they might somehow become separated in the thickening snowfall. When the administrative building finally comes into view, Emma feels a disproportionate sense of relief. Patricia Delaney stands at the window watching their approach, her silhouette framed against the warm light inside. For a brief, disorienting moment, Emma is reminded of the gravedigger from the photograph, a solitary figure observing from a distance. They thank Patricia for her assistance, promising to share any significant findings from their research. As they prepare to leave, the historian offers one last comment that stays with Emma long after they've departed. "History isn't always what's written in books or preserved in photographs," Patricia says, her eyes holding Emma's with unusual intensity. "Sometimes the most important truths are those passed down through generations, person to person, like secrets too dangerous for paper or film." Later, as Marcus navigates the increasingly treacherous roads back toward the city center, Emma will wonder why she didn't ask Patricia to elaborate. What truths about Oakwood Cemetery might have been passed down through generations? What secrets might Patricia Delaney be keeping? But in the moment, she merely nods, unsettled by the woman's penetrating gaze and eager to return to the familiar environment of the Historical Society, with its bright lights and climate-controlled archives, a place where mysteries are methodically researched, categorized, and explained. What she won't notice until much later, when reviewing the photograph she took at the cemetery, is the slight distortion in the snow near plot 237, a depression that looks almost like a footprint, yet not quite human in its shape, a mark that wasn't there when she took the picture, but somehow appeared in the image afterward. Back at the Chicago Historical Society, Emma and Marcus waste no time diving into the archives, searching for any record of Elizabeth Miller's donated possessions. The process is tedious. The Society's collection is vast, and donations from the 1940s are not fully digitized. The Archives Department occupies the entire eastern wing of the building's third floor, a labyrinth of storage rooms, conservation laboratories, and research spaces. As senior staff members, Emma and Marcus have access to areas restricted to the public, including the acquisition logs dating back to the Society's founding in 1856. Hours pass as they sift through acquisition logs and inventory cards, searching for any mention of Elizabeth Miller or donations connected to Oakwood Cemetery. The afternoon sun fades to evening darkness outside the high windows of the research room. Most staff have left for the day, but Emma and Marcus barely notice, their focus absolute. Found something, Marcus announces finally, carefully turning a yellowed index card. Donation received June 1942, estate of Elizabeth Miller. Contents include personal correspondence, family Bible, photographic equipment and related materials, miscellaneous household items deemed of historical interest. Emma leans over his shoulder to read the card. Accession number 42, 197, she notes. That's our reference for locating the actual items. Where would these items be stored? She asks, already gathering their notes. Marcus consults the location code on the card. Sub-basement storage, Section D. Preservation status listed as unopened original containers. Emma's excitement is palpable. They've never been properly cataloged, just stored away for 80 years. The sub-basement of the Historical Society is a labyrinth of climate-controlled rooms filled with artifacts awaiting proper processing, what archivists informally refer to as the backlog. Despite the Society's best efforts, the sheer volume of historical materials donated over decades means that many items wait years, or even decades, before being fully cataloged and made available to researchers. Section D contains dozens of boxes and trunks, some dating back to the early 20th century. The air here is noticeably cooler, maintained at a constant 65 degrees Fahrenheit with 40% relative humidity, optimal conditions for preserving a variety of materials. Motion-activated lights illuminate their path as they move through the rows of shelving. With the help of their employee badges and a set of master keys Marcus has access to as department head, they locate the Miller donation, 3 wooden crates and a leather trunk, all tagged with yellowing paper labels marked 42-197. We'll need gloves, Marcus says, ever the conscientious archivist. He retrieves a pair for each of them from a supply cabinet near the entrance to the storage area. They begin with the trunk, which contains mostly clothing and household items. Elizabeth Miller's dresses, handkerchiefs, and personal effects, carefully wrapped in acid-free tissue paper by some long-ago archivist. The first crate holds books, including the family Bible, with a detailed family tree inscribed on the frontispiece, tracing the Millers back to their arrival in America in 1795. The second contains Joseph Miller's groundskeeping tools and ledgers, similar to those they viewed at the cemetery but covering earlier periods of his employment. His meticulous record-keeping is evident throughout, precise notes on plantings, maintenance schedules, and burial procedures, all documented in the same careful handwriting they'd seen in his final reports. It's the third crate that yields their prize, a wooden box labeled Father's Photographic Equipment in faded ink, the handwriting matching samples of Elizabeth Miller's correspondence found in the trunk. Inside, wrapped carefully in layers of cloth, they find the remains of a crushed camera, a Scoville Waterbury model popular in the 1880s, its brass fittings tarnished with age, the wooden body splintered as if stepped on by a tremendous weight. This matches the description in the report, Marcus murmurs, examining the damaged camera with professional interest, completely destroyed but deliberately preserved by his daughter. Beneath the camera, in a flat tin case lined with velvet, lies a single glass photographic plate. Unlike typical plates, which would appear dark where exposed to light, this one shows deep grooves scored across its surface, as if scratched by something with multiple points, like claws or talons. The scoring is not random but follows a distinct pattern, suggesting deliberate defacement rather than accidental damage. The damaged plate mentioned in the report, Emma whispers, holding it carefully to the light. Despite the scoring, portions of the image are still visible, what appears to be the same cemetery setting as the photograph Emma purchased, but from a different angle, focused on an area of disturbed earth. The quality of the surviving portions suggests Miller was indeed a skilled photographer, achieving remarkable clarity despite the challenging conditions of night photography in 1885. We need to digitize this, Marcus decides, his academic interest fully engaged now. Our lab has equipment that might be able to enhance what remains of the image, maybe even digitally reconstruct parts of it. They carefully transport the plate to the digital preservation lab one floor above. The specialized scanner, designed specifically for fragile photographic materials, takes several minutes to process the fragile glass plate. When the image finally appears on the monitor, they both lean forward in anticipation. Much of the photograph is indeed destroyed by the scoring marks, but enough remains visible to discern a disturbing scene. The ground, in what they now know is plot 237, appears broken open from below, earth scattered in a pattern suggesting eruption rather than digging. At the edge of the visible portion, before a deep score obliterates the rest, is what looks like a pale, elongated limb emerging from the soil, not decomposed or skeletal, but somehow wrong in its proportions and texture. What might be digits or appendages extend from the limb, too numerous and too long to be human fingers. What are we looking at? Marcus murmurs. Professional detachment momentarily abandoned. Emma shakes her head slowly, unable to reconcile the image with any known creature. I don't know, but Miller saw it too. It's what he was trying to document. She turns to her colleague. This connects directly to the photograph I found. The face reflected in the shovel. What if it's Miller himself? What if he captured not just the cemetery that day, but something happening in it that the human eye couldn't perceive directly? That's a significant leap, Marcus cautions, though his voice lacks conviction. Reflective surfaces in photography can produce unusual effects, especially with long exposure times. What looks like a face could be a combination of light and shadow, interpreted by our brains as human features. Then explain this. Emma gestures to the damaged plate. Something destroyed Miller's camera and tried to destroy this plate the same night he died of supposed exposure, with bleeding hands and a face frozen in terror. Marcus has no immediate answer. Instead, he focuses on practical next steps. We should compare both images more thoroughly, look for any commonalities or patterns, and we should digitally enhance your original photograph further, see if there's anything else visible in the shovel's reflection that we missed. They work methodically, using the lab's advanced imaging software to extract every possible detail from both photographs. The enhanced shovel reflection reveals more than just a face. There's a suggestion of movement behind it, a blurred shape with the same unnatural proportions as the limb in Miller's damaged plate. The background of both images shows the same section of Oakwood Cemetery but from different angles, suggesting Miller moved positions between taking the two photographs. These were taken minutes or hours apart, Emma theorizes, arranging the images side by side on the monitor. The first shows something reflected that wasn't visibly present in the cemetery. The second shows it beginning to emerge. And then it attacked Miller, Marcus continues the thought, destroying his camera and nearly destroying the evidence he'd captured. But not completely, Emma points out. And his daughter preserved what remained even though she likely never developed the plate herself. She knew it was important. The question is what happened after Miller's death. The newspaper reports no further disappearances or disturbances. Emma returns to her notes from the cemetery records. The board implemented new security measures. And here, look, they commissioned a thorough inspection of all recent burial sites and reinforcement of plot boundaries with iron markers. Iron, Marcus repeats thoughtfully, traditionally associated with protection against supernatural entities and folklore across multiple cultures. Emma gives him a surprised look. I didn't expect you to go there. He shrugs, adjusting his glasses. I'm an academic, not a closed-minded one. Folk beliefs often originate from practical solutions to real problems, whether or not the understanding of those problems was accurate. He examines the images again. Whatever the cemetery board did, It seems to have worked. The disappearances stopped. Until now, Emma says quietly. What do you mean? She pulls up the photograph she took at the cemetery earlier that day on her phone, zooming in on an area near plot 237. I didn't notice this before, but look, the snow is disturbed in a specific pattern, not like a human footprint, not like an animal track. Marcus studies the image, frowning. It could be nothing. Wind patterns perhaps, or a shadow created by the angle of the sun. Or it could be that whatever was there in 1885 is stirring again. Emma counters. The timing can't be coincidental. This photograph has been hidden away for over a century. Now it resurfaces. I purchase it, and within days there are signs of activity at the exact same plots Miller documented. You think the photograph itself is connected to the phenomenon? Marcus sounds skeptical. That seems unlikely. Not the physical photograph, Emma clarifies, but the attention being paid to it, to this history. What if this entity, whatever it is, responds to being observed? What if Miller's documentation of it somehow contained or suppressed it, and now our investigation is reawakening it? She remembers her dream from the night before, the Gravedigger's warning. It feeds on observation. The idea that focused attention, the act of seeing and being seen, could somehow empower or awaken something hidden beneath Oakwood Cemetery seems absurd in the brightly lit laboratory, and yet the evidence before them suggests connections that can't be easily dismissed. Marcus sits back, processing the implication. That's a troubling theory, and difficult to test without potentially causing the very problem we're hypothesizing. We need to go back to the cemetery, Emma decides. Tonight. That's not advisable, Marcus objects. Even setting aside your supernatural theory, trespassing in a cemetery after dark could cost us our jobs if we're caught. We won't trespass. Oakwood closes at dusk, but they're hosting a historical lantern tour this evening. It was advertised on their website when I was researching. We can join as participants, which gives us legitimate access to the grounds. Marcus checks his watch, an antique pocket watch inherited from his grandfather, its gold case catching the laboratory lights. The tour starts in 90 minutes. Emma is already packing her equipment, camera, extra batteries, flashlight. Just enough time to get there if we hurry. Marcus hesitates only briefly before following suit, gathering his coat and gloves. I must be losing my mind, he mutters, but there's an undercurrent of excitement in his voice that belies the complaint. Like Emma, he can't walk away from this mystery now, not when they're so close to understanding what Joseph Miller encountered in Oakwood Cemetery in November 1885. They stop at a diner near the cemetery for a quick meal, using the time to formulate a plan. The lantern tour will follow a predetermined route, focusing on the historic sections and famous monuments. At some point, they'll need to separate from the group to investigate the pioneer section, particularly the plots mentioned in Miller's reports. We should check the condition of those iron markers, Marcus suggests, warming his hands on his coffee mug. See if they've been maintained or if they've deteriorated over time. And we need to document any signs of disturbance, Emma adds, anything similar to what Miller reported. We shouldn't split up, Marcus insists, somewhat to Emma's amusement. I wasn't going to suggest it, she assures him. I've seen enough horror movies to know better. The sky is fully dark when they arrive at Oakwood's entrance gates, where a small group of history enthusiasts has gathered for the tour. To Emma's surprise, Patricia Delaney is there, now dressed in period-appropriate Victorian mourning attire, complete with a black veil. She recognizes Emma and Marcus with evident surprise. Twice in one day, she observes. Your research must be quite compelling. We found some interesting connections, Emma replies carefully. The lantern tour seemed like a good opportunity to see the grounds from a different perspective. Patricia studies them for a moment longer than comfortable before nodding. Indeed, night transforms familiar landscapes, especially in places like this. She distributes antique-styled electric lanterns to each participant. Please stay with the group. Oakwood's paths can be treacherous after dark, particularly in this weather. The tour begins at the main mausoleum, with Patricia sharing stories of Chicago's notable citizens interred within its marble walls. Her knowledge of the cemetery's history is encyclopedic, her narrative skills impressive as she weaves together historical facts with personal anecdotes about the deceased. The group consists of about 15 people, making it relatively easy for Emma and Marcus to gradually position themselves toward the back as they move from one landmark to the next. The snow has stopped, but the cold has intensified. Emma's breath forms white clouds in the beam of her lantern. The cemetery at night is a different world, Shadows deeper, silence more complete. The monuments casting long, distorted shapes across the snow-covered ground. As Patricia leads the group toward the central fountain to discuss Victorian mourning customs, Emma nudges Marcus and nods toward a side path. They slip away quietly, lanterns dimmed, and make their way toward the pioneer section in the northeast corner. The snow crunches beneath their boots, unnaturally loud in the stillness. Emma checks her phone's map function, where she's marked the locations of the disturbed plots from Miller's reports. "We should reach plot 237 in about 2 minutes if we continue this direction," she whispers. Marcus keeps close, his earlier skepticism now tempered by the eerie atmosphere. "What exactly are we hoping to find?" "Confirmation," Emma replies, "one way or another." They navigate carefully between the ancient headstones, some tilted at odd angles after more than a century of shifting earth. Their lantern light catches the worn inscriptions, brief glimpses of names and dates marking lives long forgotten. A sound stops them both, a soft scraping, like metal against frozen soil. "Did you hear that?" Emma breathes. Marcus nods, turning slowly to scan their surroundings. The cemetery stretches in all directions, silent and still once more. "Probably just ice falling from a tree branch," he suggests, but his voice lacks conviction. They continue more cautiously now, until they reach Catherine Wells's grave, plot 237, the first site where Miller reported disturbances. In daylight, the grave had appeared unremarkable. Now, illuminated by their lanterns, they immediately see what they missed before. The snow covering the grave is disturbed, not by footprints or animal tracks, but by a pattern of depressions radiating outward from the center of the plot, as if something had pushed up from below with multiple appendages, testing the soil's resistance. "Recent activity," Marcus observes, voice hushed. "These impressions weren't here this afternoon." Emma kneels to examine the pattern more closely, careful not to touch the disturbed area. The depressions are precise, almost geometrically arranged, with a larger central depression surrounded by smaller ones in a circular pattern. She's reminded of the way certain sea creatures leave marks in sand as they emerge from beneath the surface. The iron marker they'd observed earlier is now partially exposed, the snow around it having melted in a perfect circle, despite the freezing temperatures. The strange symbols engraved on its surface seem to absorb their lantern light rather than reflect it, creating the unsettling impression of depths beyond the metal's physical dimensions. "I want to document this," Emma decides, reaching for her camera. As she photographs the strange pattern, Marcus moves several steps away to get a wider perspective of the area. His lantern illuminates plot 242 nearby, the second location Miller had mentioned in his reports. "Emma," he calls softly, "you need to see this." She joins him, following his gaze to where the light falls on the neighboring grave. Its snow covering is similarly disturbed, but the pattern is different, more pronounced, the central depression larger, the radiating marks deeper. Whatever made these impressions was more forceful here, pressing harder against the barrier of earth and stone. The iron marker is fully exposed, the snow around it not just melted but vaporized, leaving a perfectly circular patch of dry ground in an otherwise snow-covered landscape. "It's escalating," Emma whispers, "just like in 1885. The disturbances Miller documented started small, then intensified. The scraping sound comes again, louder this time, from the direction of the family plot, the third location in Miller's reports. Without discussing it, they move toward the sound, lanterns held high. The family monument stands tall against the night sky, its granite surface gleaming dully in the artificial light. The snow around it is not just disturbed but partially cleared, exposing the frozen ground beneath. In the center of the exposed area is what appears to be a thin fissure in the soil, no wider than a pencil. As they watch, frozen in place, a soft shower of dirt rises from the fissure, not falling down, but drifting upward, as if drawn by some unseen force. The scraping sound intensifies, now recognizable as something hard moving against the underside of the frost layer. The 4 iron markers positioned at the corners of the family plot are visibly vibrating, as if struggling to contain something that presses against their influence. "We should go," Marcus says, backing away slowly. "Now." Emma raises her camera, compelled to document what they're witnessing despite the growing sense of danger. The flash illuminates the scene for a split second, capturing the impossible physics of the rising soil. The scraping stops abruptly. For 3 heartbeats, the cemetery is utterly silent. Then the fissure widens, not gradually, but in a sudden, violent movement that sends frozen chunks of earth flying outward. Emma and Marcus duck instinctively, narrowly avoiding being struck. When they look up again, the fissure has become a ragged hole about 8 inches in diameter. From within comes a sound unlike anything Emma has ever heard. A high, thin keening that seems to bypass her ears and vibrate directly in her skull. The sensation is physically painful, bringing tears to her eyes. Marcus grabs her arm, pulling her back. "We need to find the tour group," he urges, voice tight with barely controlled fear. They retreat, moving as quickly as the treacherous footing allows. But not before Emma glimpses something emerging from the hole. A pale, segmented appendage that unfolds with mechanical precision, testing the air like an insect's antenna, but far larger, with an oily sheen that reflects their lantern light in prismatic patterns. The appendage extends further than seems physically possible from an 8-inch hole, suggesting dimensions that don't conform to normal spatial relationships. They don't look back again, focusing instead on retracing their steps to the main path. The sound follows them, changing in pitch and intensity, sometimes fading only to resurge closer than before. They hear movement through the snow behind them, a rhythmic pattern suggesting multiple points of contact with the ground. Not footsteps, but something else entirely. The main tour path comes into view, and with it, the distant glow of lanterns as the historical tour continues near the chapel. Emma and Marcus break into a run, abandoning caution in their haste to rejoin the group and the relative safety it represents. They're within 50 yards of the tour when Emma's foot catches on a partially buried monument, sending her sprawling into the snow. Her lantern flies from her grip, rolling several feet away before going dark. Marcus stops to help her up, his own lantern illuminating her shocked expression as she stares past him. Standing between them and the tour group is a figure holding a shovel. For an impossible moment, Emma thinks they've somehow encountered the subject of the 1885 photograph, the gravedigger with his face obscured by shadow. But as the figure steps closer, the light reveals Patricia Delaney, still in her Victorian morning dress, her expression unreadable behind her veil. "You shouldn't have come back," she says, voice unnaturally calm. "You've drawn its attention now, just as he did." "What is it?" Emma asks, slowly regaining her feet. Behind them, the keening sound grows louder, accompanied by the soft crunch of snow as something approaches. Patricia lifts her veil, revealing eyes that reflect the lantern light oddly, not with the normal red-eye effect of flash photography, but with a prismatic shimmer similar to the appendage they glimpsed emerging from the earth. "It has no name in your language," she replies. "It was here before this land had a name, before humans walked upon it. It sleeps usually, dormant beneath the weight of time and earth and stone. But it wakes sometimes," Marcus says, understanding dawning in his voice. "When disturbed," Patricia nods, "when the ground above it is broken for burials, when attention is focused upon it." She looks pointedly at Emma's camera. "When it is observed, especially when it is captured in images that allow others to observe it across time. Your photograph, the one you found, it was a containment measure, not just documentation." Miller understood at the end. Miller, Emma realizes. He tried to warn people, to document what was happening. "Joseph was my great-grandfather," Patricia reveals. "Elizabeth was my grandmother. They dedicated their lives to keeping it contained after it took the others. Iron boundaries, specific rituals, careful attention to which plots could safely be used for new burials. And you've continued their work," Marcus concludes. "That's why you're the cemetery historian, why you've stayed." Patricia tightens her grip on the shovel. The same shovel from the original photograph, Emma realizes with a shock, recognizing its distinctive handle. The metal blade reflects their lantern light, momentarily capturing their 3 faces in its surface. "For 80 years I've maintained the boundaries, redirected curious visitors, ensured the safety of Oakwood and those who visit it." Her voice hardens. "Until you found his photograph, until you began asking questions and disturbing what should remain still." Behind them, the keening reaches a painful intensity. Emma risks a glance over her shoulder and immediately wishes she hadn't. The entity is no longer hiding its presence. It moves across the snow in a motion that defies natural locomotion, not crawling or slithering, but advancing in a series of precise geometric adjustments, its pale segmented body reflecting their lantern light in nauseating patterns. What Emma had briefly glimpsed as a single appendage has multiplied, or perhaps unfurled, into a complex arrangement of limbs and protrusions that seem to exist in more dimensions than should be possible. Its overall shape suggests an insectoid form, but with proportions and articulations that no earthly creature possesses. Most disturbing is its surface, not flesh or chitin, but something else entirely, with a texture that shifts and flows like liquid metal, but maintains distinct segments and articulations. How do we stop it? Emma asks desperately, turning back to Patricia. We don't, the older woman replies grimly. We can only contain it, direct its attention elsewhere. It feeds on observation, on being perceived. Then we need to give it something else to focus on, Marcus suggests, a plan forming in his mind. Something more compelling than us. Patricia's expression changes, understanding what he's proposing. It would require a powerful lure, something with deep emotional resonance, amplified by the act of observation. The photograph, Emma realizes. The original plate Miller took the night he died. It captured the entity directly, not just as a reflection. It's been trying to destroy that image for over a century, Patricia confirms. Even damaged, the plate holds power over it. The power of being seen, documented, made real in human perception. We have it, Marcus tells her, at the Historical Society. We found it today in your grandmother's possessions. For the first time, Patricia shows genuine surprise. You've viewed it? Digitized it. When they nod, she closes her eyes briefly. Then it's already begun. The connection is established. The entity is closer now, close enough that Emma can make out more of its impossible anatomy, a body that seems to exist in more dimensions than the human eye can process, with appendages that fold and unfold in ways that defy physical logic. Its surface is not flesh or chitin, but something else entirely, with a texture that shifts and flows like liquid metal, but maintains distinct segments and articulations. What do we do? Emma asks, voice barely audible over the entity's keening. Patricia hands her the shovel, the same shovel from the original photograph, Emma realizes, recognizing its distinctive handle. Take this. It's been in contact with the entity before. It will recognize it. She removes something from around her neck, a small iron key on a leather cord. This opens the northeastern maintenance shed. Inside you'll find what you need to complete the boundary. What about you? Marcus asks. I'll draw its attention, Patricia says simply. Buy you time. I've prepared for this possibility my entire life. She reaches into her pocket and produces a small glass vial containing what looks like soil mixed with iron filings. Now go. Follow the path to the maintenance shed. And Emma, she adds, when this is over, destroy both photographs. Let it fade from human memory once more. Before they can protest, Patricia turns to face the approaching entity, uncorking the vial and beginning to recite what sounds like Latin mixed with something older, harsh syllables that hurt to hear. The entity's keening changes pitch, focusing on her instead of them. Emma and Marcus run, following the path Patricia indicated toward the northeastern corner of the cemetery. Behind them, they hear Patricia's voice rise in volume, the entity's response growing more frenzied. The maintenance shed is a small stone structure, nearly hidden among evergreen trees at the cemetery's edge. Emma's hands shake as she fits the iron key into the ancient lock. Inside, illuminated by Marcus's lantern, they find shelves of equipment, shovels, picks, modern landscaping tools, but also something unexpected, a carefully arranged collection of iron markers, each inscribed with symbols similar to those found in the Miller family Bible. These must be the boundary markers, Marcus says, examining one. Look at the placement diagram. A yellowed map tacked to the wall shows Oakwood Cemetery with specific points marked in red ink, forming a complex geometric pattern centered on the Pioneer section. Many of the markers are indicated as already placed, but several positions, including those corresponding to the 3 disturbed plots, are marked as renewal required. We need to place these markers at those locations, Emma realizes, gathering the iron stakes. Complete the boundary that contains it. Marcus checks the map again. There are 7 markers to place. Patricia has likely been maintaining most of them regularly, but these 3 locations, he points to the disturbed plots, would be where the entity is most active, making regular renewal dangerous. They divide the markers between them and hurry back toward the Pioneer section. The sounds of Patricia's confrontation with the entity have changed, her voice now interspersed with periods of silence, the entity's keening more rhythmic, almost like speech. The first marker must be placed at plot 237. As they approach, Emma can see Patricia about 50 yards away, still facing the entity, still holding its attention. The older woman's Victorian dress is torn at the hem, and she stands differently now, with an unnatural rigidity that sends a chill through Emma. "Quickly," Marcus urges, positioning the first iron marker at the head of Catherine Wells' grave, exactly where the diagram indicates. Emma drives it into the ground with the shovel Patricia gave her. The moment the iron penetrates the earth, the entity's keening shifts to a higher register. Aware of what they're doing, but still focused on Patricia, they move to plot 242, repeating the process. 2 more markers are placed at cardinal points around the family plot. The entity is agitated now, its form seeming to flicker between states of materiality, sometimes solid enough to leave impressions in the snow, sometimes nearly transparent. Patricia stands unnaturally still, arms extended toward the entity, her voice reduced to a whisper. As Emma watches in horror, the woman's posture becomes even more rigid, her body lifting slightly until only the tips of her shoes touch the ground. It's controlling her, Marcus realizes, using her to anchor itself here. "We need to hurry," Emma says, moving toward the next marker position. The final markers prove most difficult to place, as they form a tight circle around the entity's entry point, the hole that has now widened to nearly 2 feet in diameter, its edges no longer ragged but smoothed to a glassy finish. The ground around it has developed a subtle concavity, as if being gradually pulled downward. As Marcus positions the penultimate marker, the entity finally diverts its attention from Patricia. The cemetery historian crumples to the snow, motionless. The entity's form coalesces into something more substantial as it turns toward them, a shape that suggests a grotesque hybridization of insect, cephalopod, and something else entirely, with too many limbs arranged in impossible configurations. Its attention fixes on the shovel in Emma's hands, specifically on the reflective metal surface of the blade. It recognizes it. Emma breathes, remembering the reflection captured in the 1885 photograph. The shovel is the connection. She steps forward, positioning the blade to catch their lantern light. "Look at your reflection," she says to the entity, unsure if it can understand, but certain it can perceive. "See yourself as we see you." The entity's movement pauses, its appendages freezing in mid-articulation. The keening stops, replaced by an expectant silence that feels more threatening than the sound. Emma continues, instinct guiding her words. "Joseph Miller saw you, captured you, made you visible to human eyes." She raises her camera with her free hand. "Just as I see you now." The entity's form ripples, distress evident in the sudden acceleration of its prismatic color shifts. It remembers being observed, being captured in Miller's photographs. It fears the same happening again. "The last marker," Emma tells Marcus without taking her eyes off the entity. "Place it now." Marcus carefully positions the final iron stake directly behind the entity, completing the containment circle. Emma keeps the creature's attention focused on the shovel's reflective surface and her camera, the twin threats of observation and documentation. "Now," she commands, and Marcus drives the stake into the ground with a single powerful thrust. The effect is immediate and dramatic. The completed circle of iron markers glows with a blue-white light that emanates not from the metal itself, but from the soil surrounding it. The light forms a dome over the entity, which writhes in what might be pain or fury or both, its keening returning with such intensity that Emma and Marcus are forced to cover their ears. The entity thrashes against the invisible barrier, its form becoming less substantial with each moment of confinement. The hole in the earth begins to close, not filled in, but sealing itself, as if time is reversing. The entity's movements grow more desperate as its access point disappears. With a final, glass-shattering keen, it collapses inward, folding into dimensions they cannot perceive until nothing remains visible, except a faint prismatic shimmer in the air that gradually fades to nothing. The iron markers continue to glow softly, their light pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm like a heartbeat or a warning. Emma lowers the shovel, hands trembling from adrenaline and cold. "Is it over?" "Contained," Marcus corrects, moving cautiously to check on Patricia. "Not destroyed. I doubt it can be destroyed, only managed." Patricia lies motionless in the snow, her Victorian dress spread around her like a dark pool. Her face, no longer partially hidden by the veil, appears decades older than it had earlier that day, as if the confrontation with the entity had accelerated her aging. But as Marcus kneels beside her, she draws a shuddering breath, eyelids fluttering open. Her gaze, when it focuses, is normal again, human, without the prismatic shimmer. "You completed the boundary," she whispers hoarsely. "Good. Will you be all right?" Emma asks, helping her to sit up. Patricia nods weakly. It took something from me, but not everything. Not like the others. She looks toward where the entity had been. The boundary will hold it for now, but not forever. Never forever. What happens next? Marcus asks, helping Patricia to her feet. You fulfill your promise, she replies, leaning heavily on his arm. Destroy the photographs. Both of them. Let it fade from memory again. She turns to Emma. And the shovel. It must be buried at the center of the boundary, where its connection to the entity will help maintain the containment. In the distance, they hear voices calling. The tour group, searching for their missing guide. Patricia straightens, composing herself with visible effort. Help me back to the group, she requests. I'll explain my absence as a spell of dizziness from the cold. You found me, and were assisting me. She fixes them both with an intense stare. No one must know what happened here. No one must seek it out again. Emma nods, understanding the responsibility they now share. We'll take care of the photographs tomorrow. And I'll help you maintain the boundary markers, Marcus offers. You shouldn't bear this burden alone any longer. Patricia's expression softens slightly. Thank you. Few have understood the necessity of vigilance as you do now. She takes a few experimental steps, growing steadier. The Historical Society's night watchman, Samuel Winters. He's my cousin. He'll help you access the archives after hours to destroy the plate properly. They make their way back to the main path, creating a believable story about Patricia's supposed dizzy spell to explain their separation from the tour. As they walk, Emma glances back at the Pioneer section one last time. The iron markers are no longer visibly glowing, having faded to ordinary appearance once more. The snow lies smooth and undisturbed, as if nothing unusual had ever happened there. But Emma knows better now. Beneath that peaceful surface, ancient things sleep. Things that respond to human attention, that feed on observation and documentation, things best left undisturbed and unremembered. The following evening, after the Historical Society has closed to the public, Emma and Marcus return with Patricia and her cousin Samuel, the night watchman. They retrieve both photographic plates, the one Emma purchased and the damaged one from Miller's possessions, and bring them to the Society's conservation laboratory. The destruction must be thorough, Patricia instructs. Physical and chemical. The images must be obliterated beyond recovery. Under her guidance, they dissolve the emulsion from both plates using a potent chemical solution, then break the glass into fine fragments, which are mixed with iron filings similar to those used in the boundary markers. The mixture is sealed in a lead container Patricia has brought specifically for this purpose. I'll bury this on consecrated ground, she explains, with appropriate precautions. Before the destruction, Emma takes one final look at both images, the gravedigger with his shovel reflecting a face of terror, and Miller's damaged plate showing something emerging from the earth. These pieces of evidence, these windows into a reality most humans never glimpse, will soon exist only in the memories of the 4 people in this room. There's one more thing, Emma says suddenly, retrieving her phone. The digital copies we made, and the photograph I took at the cemetery yesterday. Patricia nods approvingly as Emma deletes the files, then performs a secure wipe of the device's cache to ensure no recovery is possible. Marcus does the same with the laboratory computer where they had enhanced the images. It's done, he says finally, as if it never existed. But they all know that isn't quite true. The entity exists, whether documented or not, sleeping beneath Oakwood Cemetery until someday, inevitably, something or someone disturbs it again. The iron boundary will need maintenance. The vigilance must continue, the knowledge passed to trustworthy keepers. As they leave the Historical Society, Emma pauses to look up at the night sky. Snow is falling again, gentle flakes swirling in the lamplight. The city continues around them, millions of people living in blissful ignorance of what lies beneath one of their oldest cemeteries. Will you continue your exhibition on Victorian memorial photography? Patricia asks as they reach the parking lot. Emma exchanges a glance with Marcus before nodding. Yes, but with a different focus, the cultural practices, the artistry, nothing that might draw attention to specific locations or anomalies. Wise, Patricia approves. Interest fades. Attention moves elsewhere. That's how we keep it contained, not just with iron and rituals, but with forgetting. They part ways with solemn handshakes and a shared understanding that they are now bound by a secret few humans have ever known. Patricia and Samuel depart with the lead container, heading toward a church cemetery where it will be safely interred. As Emma and Marcus walk to their separate cars, a comfortable silence between them. Emma glances at her colleague. "Do you think there are others?" she asks quietly. "Other things like it, in other places, other keepers maintaining other boundaries." Marcus considers this for a moment before nodding slowly. "Almost certainly. The world is older and stranger than we're taught to believe." He unlocks his car but doesn't immediately get in. "Will you be all right with this, knowing what we know now?" Emma looks back toward the Historical Society building where thousands of artifacts wait in climate-controlled storage, objects with histories, some perhaps with secrets similar to what they've discovered. Her role as an archivist takes on new meaning now, a responsibility beyond mere preservation of the past. Yes, she decides, some knowledge is a burden, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be carried. She offers a small smile. Besides, now Patricia has help. The boundary will be stronger for it. They go their separate ways, returning to outwardly normal lives forever changed by what they've witnessed. Emma will continue her work, more careful now about which histories she chooses to illuminate and which are better left in darkness. Marcus will incorporate subtle warnings into his academic papers, guiding future researchers away from dangerous inquiries without explicitly revealing why. And beneath Oakwood Cemetery, ancient iron markers pulse with faint energy, maintaining the boundary between worlds. The entity sleeps once more, undocumented, unobserved, gradually fading from memory, until the next time someone notices something strange in an old photograph and looks too closely at a gravedigger's shovel. 3 months later, in a dimly lit apartment in Boston, a graduate student in paranormal studies scrolls through an online auction site, searching for Victorian-era photographs for his thesis on spirit photography. A listing catches his attention. Antique cemetery photograph, 1885, unusual reflection. The image is small and unclear, but something about it compels him to place a bid. As he clicks confirm purchase, he doesn't notice the reflection in his computer screen, a pale, segmented form that appears for just an instant before vanishing. In Chicago, Emma Davidson wakes suddenly from a dreamless sleep, heart pounding. A name she's never heard before echoing in her mind. Thomas Blackwood, the Boston graduate student who will soon receive a package containing a photograph he should never see. She reaches for her phone to call Marcus. The cycle begins again.